Welcome to HubSpot's Unconventional Business podcast. I'm your host, James Gilbert. The best companies are the ones that make it incredibly easy and delightful to do business with. It's seamless, frictionless, intuitive. It's not just a better experience, they're actually disrupting our very notion of what consumers should be able to expect from companies. You see, Aussies and Kiwis are a hard bunch to please. We have some of the highest expectations in the world, and luckily for us, our homegrown businesses know this. This season on HubSpot's Unconventional Business, you'll be meeting some of our best homegrown brands as they share how they're growing and winning by disrupting the customer experience. Let's meet today's guest. Today we've got some guests who operate in an industry that I think we'd all agree is generally pretty conventional, and that is the tile industry. We have Floss and Drew, the co-founders of TileCloud, showing us how an unconventional approach in a conventional industry can lead to some great success. Welcome Floss, welcome Drew. How are you going?
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. All good here.
For people that aren't familiar with TileCloud, what would be the elevator pitch on what it is exactly?
We're a online tile store specializing in tiles for bathroom renovations.
I think you're the largest online tile company in Australia, is that right? Or one of the leading players?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know where you can get good transparency around who's doing what numbers across the whole scene, but it certainly feels that way.
We definitely feel that we're the leaders in this space as well. We things that we are always looking outside of the box of how to make our website better, how to make our customer experience better, how to make our product selection better. And so we're definitely pushing the boundaries of the tiles online space. So yeah, just as a front runner of style, branding, and website, I definitely would say we're number one in that, on all of those areas.
Why is that the case? Like often, I think you're a relatively new entrant in this space. Selling things online is not that new anymore. Like what about the industry meant that it was slower to get online than other industries?
Yeah, if you walk into a tile shop, it feels like the tiles have been on the shelves for a long time. It feels like we've been doing this for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, so we're just going to keep on doing it that way. None of us have ever worked in a tile store, and so the way that people were doing things, we don't do them that way. We just like to do them the new way, and everyone else is shopping online, and so you can definitely buy your tiles online as well.
When we started looking around for what we wanted the store to look and feel like, we didn't look in the construction, building, renovation industries for inspiration, because there's a lot less action happening in that space anyway. All of our inspiration was sort of more from fashion and some of those other categories that are a lot more mature in the online space. Faster moving, higher competition. Yeah, beauty is a good one as well. There's a lot of guys that are doing really innovative stuff, from branding through to product offers and all that kind of stuff that is just, they're pushing the envelope further and faster. And for us, that's a better benchmark to be trying to, aspire towards as we entered into the space, rather than, just try and compete with mediocre.
That's a really good insight. That's one thing that we often do at HubSpot too, is try to look at what's the most cutting edge competitive industry for like online marketing, and what are they doing that we can do in the software world. And for us, that's often gaming companies. Like a lot of the gaming companies have been in the digital space for the longest. Like everything they do is digital, even to the goods they sell and etc. So they're often at the bleeding edge of what you could be doing, whether it's a paid marketing or content marketing, and then taking that as a software company is always where we uncover a lot of good opportunities that we just haven't come across yet. But what about your backgrounds led you to be doing this? I think for a lot of people, it probably seems one of the more out of the blue things to just be selling tiles online. It's not something that pops up in everybody's imagination. Like,
Unless you're Drew Manser, then it pops up in his imagination. And then
That could be the answer.
yeah, then you've got to be someone quite specific.
It's not an outrageous way to get there. I had a background in construction management, was in the building industry, and we still do have a separate business, which is a commercial tile installation company. Through years of working in that space, sort of learned a little bit about tiles and about who's who in the zoo, where the supply comes from, and how, price points and all that kind of thing. And then just started to feel like there was a bit of an opportunity to take what was a very traditional bricks and mortar buying experience online. And don't get me wrong, we know that it's not the perfect experience for everyone, but there's a lot of people that it is very convenient for, and that's who we're looking to help out. We're able to bring a much bigger range and a much more competitive price point to a lot of regional and remote guys that previously didn't have options, and service them in the same way that we service our metro customers. And that's some of the most transformative customer feedback that we get is guys that are sort of getting access to stuff that they just never previously did, because we didn't want it to be just like servicing, Sydney and Melbourne Metro. And that was like, that is the easy part. Like the freight network is there. Everything is easy there. And it was like, let's do something bigger. And I think maybe a little bit of that is because I'm originally from the Central West. And so, grew up in in one of the areas that has less choice compared to a big city.
When we started TileCloud, Drew and our other business partner, Mark, had the commercial tiling business. And when Drew came to me and was like, oh, I've got this idea, we're looking for someone to be like the creative part. My first thought of it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this on the side. And Drew was like, no, we're doing it and we're going to do it. It's not going to be this side thing that's like, oh, we've started an online store. It's like, no, we've started the Australian tile online store. So when we were designing the website and all the branding, we made our sample boxes and we wrote on the side of it, Australia's online tile store, from like the outset. And we're just like, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. And this is where we're going to go. So, which was very exciting. And how Drew and I know each other is Drew's married to my sister, Hannah, and Drew and I met at uni, and then he met my sister. And so, but Drew and Mark have a construction background and I have got a design background and worked for retail stores. I used to work for an Australian design company called Mud Australia that makes ceramics here in Sydney. And through my time at Mud, I learned about retail and branding, and under the owner of Mud called Shelley Simpson, who had lots of inspiring information about Australia's Australia's traditional retail and online space. And so I was able to bring that information over. Very different. The boys would talk about things in tiling that I wouldn't know what they would mean. They would say words like mited and rectified and lapado. And I'm like, if I don't know what that means and I, studied ceramics, then, Jenny, who's doing her renovation, in Wollongong, definitely doesn't know what that means. So we were able to very clearly set a tone and, through and even today, like through the skills that Drew and Mark have compared to what I have, we're able to merge the two together. So we had a lady with an issue, and then we were able to be like, oh, here's our Drew and Mark who've got their, who know tiling, who know the trade, and we're able to give people advice and help them through, but with a toned down language as well, which is good.
I think that is probably the key to your success. Like back to the original starting point, it's the intersection of a great online experience for a new buyer that previously hasn't had access to the, the slate of products in such an easy way. That's really interesting. The commitment that from the start that this is going to be a huge company, we want this to be the number one tile company in Australia. Did that lead you to make different choices than you would have if it had just been like let's just start this website and see how it goes? Like we're already buying tiles and selling tiles. Definitely.
I mean, obviously it's easy to have a website that reaches nationally. That's everything. But like in terms of a more impactful part of the business, the freight is the number one element that changes if you're going to be servicing a state or a region compared to nationally. And just putting in the legwork to find the carriers that can service these areas properly.
We've used everyone. We've tried everyone.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. And then also figuring out the pricing of how that would all work as well. Tiles are obviously inherently fragile, but the other thing that people forget is like physically how big the orders actually are and how heavy they actually are to sort of like visualize how big of a pile of tiles you need to tile a bathroom. I think the average person would like grossly underestimate how big that raw material actually is. And so, when we are talking to customers, our prospective customers who are obviously online shoppers in other aspects of their life, whether it's groceries or, fashion or whatever, they're used to buying stuff that's smaller or lighter. And a lot of the time that might go through Australia Post and you're talking maybe like, $5 shipping for a T-shirt to the other side of the country, or, a couple dollars here or there for, maybe some jewelry, like whatever you're buying. It's percentage-wise relative to the cost of the actual purchase. It's a much smaller percentage, and overall you can hide those costs in the cost of the product relatively easily. If you've got a $50 T-shirt and you hide it and increase the price to $55 and then offer free shipping, it's like it's not actually free shipping. You've paid for it in an embedded cost. But when it comes to tiles, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to do that, because you're gonna price yourself out of the product in the first instance if you load up your price with shipping. And so when our customers are used to having free shipping, it was definitely a delicate balance of finding the right price point and how we manage their expectations that, although this is an online purchase and, our user experience does look and feel a little bit like, a fashion experience from, ASOS or The Iconic or, somewhere else that you've shopped, earlier this week. This part is a little bit different. And so there's been a lot of information and awareness that's gone into sort of like calibrating expectations on that part of like what's actually going to show up at the door, and how it's actually going to have to get there.
We have people turn up to do a pickup and they've got like a whole bathroom worth of tiles, and they'll come in like a mini Yaris and it's like 1.2 tons.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, you need to do like 4 trips, mate. Like you've got to come back and do that. But we do like videos about like, if you order this is what's going to rock up. People are like, can you just send it to my local Australia Post and I'll pick it up from there? And we have to say to them, no, it comes on a pallet, it's strapped, like you need to have it delivered to your house. We can there is some authority to leave, but majority of time you should be there because you have spent a lot of money on it as well. So it's constantly managing our customers' expectations, and we've just found more information the better, and it's like just keep on saying it over and over again, and then they understand what's actually going to arrive. It's not just the beautiful little sample box when but in a bigger scale and a bigger box, it's it is a big pallet that needs a specialty truck and all that kind of stuff.
And so those customers, like you started out with the more commercial operation where I assume you're selling to developers or like big owners and probably installing the tiles.
Actually, with
yourself
TileCloud, from day one, the focus has always been like renovation and DIY customers. So there has been we didn't really leverage like our network from our previous business. It was like, we want to talk direct to the retail customer, and that was who we're talking to from the start.
Why did you think there was an opportunity with them? I think you've just like outlined a bunch of issues that like a retail customer clearly they don't think about. What made you think that you'd be able to overcome those obstacles and actually sell to them?
We didn't have it all figured out right at the start, that's for sure. But I think that the kind of the insight at the start of the business in sort of like the conception phase was that convenience trumps most other things moving forward, that is sort of like a new purchasing behavior, and where previously customers might have been a little bit more price sensitive or even quality sensitive, that moving forward and sort of on the back of like prolific online mattress sales, and there's a bunch of different categories that are would have traditionally been seen as, you need to touch and feel this product before you're gonna purchase anything. Like, oh, I've got to lay on the mattress, I've got to bounce on it, I need to know what's going on here, and it's like, actually that's what we thought, but as it turns out, if you can kind of de-risk the proposition a little bit by offering the free trial in the instance of the mattress, and you've got a competitive price and a good looking product, the convenience of just having it show up is like, I'll give that a shot. And next thing you know, these guys are booming. And so it's sort of a little bit of that mindset coming over into a different category and saying, okay, well, we're talking to that same customer. They haven't sort of had the opportunity to sort of exercise that buying behavior in this category before in their home renovation purchasing, but they're doing that same thing, and they're making those decisions and opting for convenience in other areas of their purchasing behavior. So it's like, they've rationalized it. Let's give it to them as an option, and we'll see what they do.
A lot of our customers do a huge amount of their renovation from their office desk. The people who, like, were our original TileCloud customers, we were sending sample boxes to people's office before they were at home, and so they'd get their sample box there, they'd look at what they liked, they'd then be on the website when they were in their lunch break or on their way to work, on the way home, and then they'd make the purchasing decisions there. Like, we knew that people didn't want to spend their Saturdays trawling around like the traditional tile shops. They wanted to do everything from the convenience of their desk or from work. And then, now with, 2020 with COVID, that's just transferred over so easily as well. So we were already set up to easily, we send out sample boxes anyway. And so people have been able to utilize our services even more, like, over the last 6 months or so.
And so you essentially had this industry where there was a bunch of barriers to a modern customer experience, and you it sounds like you've come up with a bunch of ways of getting over those obstacles. A major one sounds like the samples, and then possibly also range of products that people in more isolated locations didn't have access to. Did you know all the barriers at the start? Did you have a checklist of like, this is why these people aren't buying tiles online, and we need to have a solution for each of these, and if we achieve that, we've got a disruptive customer experience? Or were you just like, okay, we know this one, let's do that, and as you have gone, you've learnt different friction points and come up with solutions to smooth it over?
I'd say we definitely didn't know everything at the beginning. We knew that there wasn't an online store for tiles, and we're like, no, we can do that. And so we did that. And then when we were building the user experience for the website, we realized that people will want samples. Like, that will be a thing that people will want, and we want to offer them that experience because they want to check that the color sage is the right one to go with their, Caesar stone bench top that they had. So that then instantly became part of the initial build for the first website that we had, that it had to have that sampling element. So it had to have a special, we had to organize all of that, but we didn't, I don't think we knew all the answers, do you, Drew?
No, definitely not. I mean, another good example of not understanding, what we were up against was we put together this beautiful website, and we did our research on what the price point needed to be, and figured out the freight pricing and, all that stuff, and got it all organized. And when we launched into the market, we were having sort of like a little bit of action, but no one was banging the door down, and we were doing our best to try and get feedback from customers and people that bought samples but maybe didn't go on to purchase. It's like, okay, what can we learn from that? Can we talk to that person? And trying to really them. Just get feedback on what the experience was, or what they ended up doing instead of going with us. Which I think is where you learn most of the good information about your entire business. But the one of the critical mistakes that we made early on, that wasn't clear to us straight away, was, until our customers started telling us, was we looked much more expensive than we actually were. So through the appearance of the brand, the colors, the logo, every one of those little aspects all goes together to sort of, create this perception of, the price point of the brand. Before you look at any numbers or anything like that, you kind of get a feel for how expensive you think it's going to be. And we were losing customers just from browsing our website, and they wouldn't even get to like a product page to see the price of an actual product, because they'd be like, well, this is beautiful, but obviously it would be expensive. So, and then, off they would go. And we had a little bit of feedback along those lines. And then when we started to ask more pointed questions for feedback in that area, sure enough, it started to, really flush out that was a common thread, that we were, mismatched between, the two parts of our offering, which was, one being what does the brand look and feel like, and the other being, what is the actual price point. And we're finding anecdotally that people were, saying, oh, it was too expensive, so I went and bought them from here. And I was like, oh, how much did you pay for those over there? And I was like, oh, this amount. And I was like, oh, we actually sell that similar product for cheaper. And so I was like, that's not their fault, it's our fault.
So how did you overcome that? That's an interesting problem.
We added the price more. We changed the font that the price point information was in. We spoke about price more. So even just like before, we'd just be like, ooh, look at this beautiful marble. And then instead we were like, actually, we don't want to sell marble. That's not who we are anyway. We do like beautiful subway tiles, and this is the price, and this is what we're doing. And it just like being like way more like transparent with what we were actually doing. And then also like just subtly changing things in images as well, making them not like, if you've got a perfect image, you look at it and you go, oh my God, that would have been expensive to shoot. So on our Instagram, putting like half done reno pictures up, and people could look at that and they're like, oh, like that, kind of just changing the tone.
UGC has been massive. User generated content, like being able to show projects as a work in progress, is sort of like, it's unpolished. It might be the bathroom half tiled, and there's no taps on the walls, and the lighting's not studio lighting, and blah blah blah. And so probably old TileCloud would have thought, oh, that's not quite up to scratch. Whereas in reality, that's exactly what people want to see. Is they want to see, how is this going to look in my project? I'm not doing a magazine shoot here. I'm doing an actual project.
If it's a half done image as well, the customer is allowed to imagine what they would do with that project as well going forward. So say if like the floor's tiled, the walls are tiled, but the taps aren't in yet, the vanity isn't in yet, or the mirror isn't in, or the styling elements, we're able to kind of put it out on our Instagram and be like, oh, look at Sandra's project. What colored taps would you put in? And then they start dreaming about their project and what they're doing. And renovating is that's the really exciting part of it, is dreaming about the room that you can create for yourself and your family, or the people you share your home with. The less fun bit is when the trades are actually there and something's going wrong, and all that stuff. But by that point, they've already purchased, and they're our customer. But being able to get the customer when they're dreaming, and where they think, they look to TileCloud and they're like, that's who I'm going to get my inspiration from. That's the brand that I align with. People come in to speak to us on the phone, and they want our look that we've created, and it's like a very Australian aesthetic. And we're not trying to be European, we're not trying to be these Italian type, like we don't even say those words in us, in our office, or that's not who we are. Like we're doing modern Australian contemporary homes, and with lots of different flavors, but that's who we are, and that's who people want to be as well.
That balance must be super interesting of how you do it, between being aspirational and then being relatable, because I feel like it sounds like you learnt a lot from being purely aspirational. It meant it was hard for people to relate to it, and so you saw less sales because of that. I imagine like both extremes are actually bad. Like if there wasn't any element of your brand that was aspirational, you would also have issues. Like how do you think about the balance between those two things, and what does that look like in what you actually do?
We obviously have a benchmark of where the brand sits right now, and it's about just making little incremental changes to different aspects, and seeing how they're received, and continuing to ask for feedback around how did the price compare to what you expected, and how did all the other elements of the business. Because I think that there's no playbook on how to get that positioning just right. Obviously, we went too far in one direction, and can bring up plenty of examples of other businesses that have gone in the other direction as a deliberate play. There's room in the market for, and customers looking for brands in each of those different categories. You can be a high-end brand and do good. You can be in the middle and do good, and you can be at the low end and do good. It's where you don't do good is when you have a disconnect between, what you're projecting and what you actually are. That's when you get into trouble, because it just doesn't feel right. I think that the customer sort of, gets that same impression pretty quickly.
I think it also, we truly became who we were. Like, it became a lot more authentic. We talk about projects that we were excited about, or we were doing, when we started, I think Instagram stories probably started a year after we started our Instagram, and using that in that social media channel to talk to people directly and get feedback about, they liked it when we talked about, we were doing a photo shoot and we were, talking about the tile behind the scenes, and people would be like, oh my God, what's this? What's that? And we just truly became authentic to ourselves as well. And so it was like, oh, this is who we are, and this is where we align with, obviously with changing it, but it became, it became much more natural, because we were fitting into, we were talking about the things that we liked and what we were doing.
The user-generated content is in line with, what you're projecting. Your tone of voice when you're trying to talk to your customers is in line with what you're trying to project. It just, all of those different elements just like mesh together, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is a cohesive brand that knows who they're talking to and knows what they're talking about. And it all just feels good. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
It takes time. It is
fascinating when you chat to brands that have that alignment, that success just seems to follow. Where I think consumers, there's something they can sense when a brand does have a disconnect from where it's been inauthentic, and whatever that sense is, it does block people from engaging with that brand, promoting that brand, and transacting with that brand. And so you often see the inauthentic brands just struggle to get any meaningful form of traction, where there is something celebrated. And I don't know that people can put their finger on exactly how or why, where a brand is truly authentic, and that alignment results in a lot of growth.
One of the other places that it shines through a lot is Flow is usually 99 times out of 100 the one on the other end of the Instagram account, whether it's Instagram stories or posts, and commenting and feedback to people, that if you're speaking what your own personal thoughts and beliefs are, which aligns with what your brand's beliefs are, and your opinion is kind of, and your style is the brand's style, all those things, when they all align, it's just easy to do that stuff. There's no extra energy required. You can just be you and respond how you want to respond, and then it's that, not forcing it. It comes through. Yeah, it's not you're not struggling for content or struggling for how to respond. It's you don't have to think of it. Just you do you, and that is the correct response. That's the answer. That's the tone of voice. That's the response.
What's the competitive landscape for you looked like?
Since we've launched, there's been lots of people who've launched and done tile stores. A lot of them looked like TileCloud as well. We like to put horse blinkers on. We like to see what's around, but kind of not look at it and just really stay in our lane, because we know that people can see exactly what we're doing by our online store and our social media. And so they can copy and they can look at what we're doing, but we just try and keep in our own lane. While it's been COVID, Beaumont Tiles, which is probably physically the biggest tile company in New South Wales and other states, has relaunched their online store. They did it a couple of years ago. It didn't work, so they took it down. And then through COVID, they relaunched it, I think. But it's one of those things where you can tell that it might just be an added extra onto what they're already offering. But there definitely are lots of tile companies who are doing it. If they end up being able to do it and do it well, good on them, but it's a hard, it's a lot of hard work that takes to get there.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty, back to the t-shirt example, it's pretty different to a lot of e-commerce products, where there's a lot more complexity when it comes to the shipping for the core product versus almost everything else that consumers, especially like that direct to consumer, would buy online. I imagine that resulted in interesting conversations when you were trying to get started, and people were like, no, are you kidding? Like the Yaris example, like people have no idea how many tiles they're actually buying when they buy them. You can't do this online because you can't control the shipping, and if it breaks, that costs you a fortune. And what was that like when you were trying to launch and chat to suppliers and say like, oh, we're going to be this online provider? And I'm sure they were looking at you questionably, possibly.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a fistful of tile wholesalers who that was the starting point for our business, was to sort of like test the waters rather than be like, oh, let's buy a bunch of shipping containers of tiles and then just see, like, hope for the best. It was no, let's start with, you know, the products that are sort of readily available to us that are you know, being brought in by other wholesalers. So we went around and talked to a few of the you know, the known players in that space, and a fair bit of it was like, no thanks, we're not interested in supplying to you guys because we feel like, you know, it's a bit of a weird overlap competing against our existing tile retail stores. We just don't want to do it, and, you know, it's not the done thing, I suppose, was the subtext. And then, funnily enough, one of our sort of like major suppliers, when we started talking to them, they weren't a major supplier at the time. They were, you know, a prospective supplier. We were talking to them and we're like, you know, we want to do this thing, blah, blah, blah. This is what it's going to look like. And they were like, we don't understand how that's going to work. We don't think it's going to work, but we are happy to, you know, support you and let you try. And I was like, that's good enough for us. Let's do it. Yeah. So, signed up an account form and got cracking, and, you know, and actually they are a very well known supplier in New South Wales in particular in the industry, and they also supply down into Victoria. And I think just by virtue of having them as a supplier to us, I think that probably opened the door to a couple of other suppliers being like, oh, well, if so and so is going to do it, then, you know, we could probably do it as well. And I would say that they were also maybe thinking that it's, you know, maybe just lip service, that we'll supply you and we'll sell you a few tiles until you know, burn your runway and you know, fold it up in a year's time or whatever. But we're happy to say that you know, that initial relationship is still, they're still an important supplier of ours, and we do plenty of business with them. And I think that you know, certainly compared to a regular tile store, you know, we're a pretty big customer of theirs now.
How did you think about that though? Like entering this, I'm going to call it a new industry, even though you were somewhat in it, but it's a pretty radical divergence from the way the industry operated. And you've got one of the people who has the most insight in the industry telling you like, this is cute, but it's not going to work. But sure, we'll sell you some tiles because, like, we'll still get paid. But, like, if you've got somebody with that much insight telling you they don't think something about an industry is going to work, how do you even think about that and get past it?
It's funny because you have to generalize a little bit and you know, bundle people into stereotypes a little bit, but to sort of like summarize the industry. But generally speaking, the construction renovation industry, the people that are, you know, in those positions of, you know, owning and operating the bigger businesses are typically a little bit older. You know, they've been there for a while. They're, you know, fairly set in their ways of how they're operating, and they have had and, you know, created the success that they've seen in their business today by doing things in a certain way. And so it's like, in their experience, that is the way to do business, and this is a different way, and they don't have experience in that, and so it's not what they know, and so it's not what they're going to, you know, recommend. But I guess a little bit similar to what we touched on before, we have seen this insight into, you know, changing, evolving customer behavior, where this idea that convenience is becoming more and more of a strong purchasing decision driver. And it's like, okay, well, where's the intersection between, you know, what's possible to even do in the industry compared to, you know, what buyer behavior is asking for? And I think that was kind of us sitting in the middle and being like, I think we can connect some dots here and find some happy ground in the middle.
And was that insight validated straight away, or was there a little bit of a time? You've got the supplier on board, you've launched. Did you see growth straight away, or was that actually hard fought at the start?
I would say from a numbers perspective, like, yes, we were seeing growth, and I don't really like startup growth numbers because they're a bit meaningless. It's like, oh, we grew 300% year on year. It's like, yeah, but if you start with $1 and then you go to $3, like, yeah, percentage wise, that's awesome, but also not good. And I would say that, like, right at the very start, that was probably more like what it felt like. It was like, yes, we were growing rapidly, but I wouldn't say at a meaningful level. And it wasn't until we started to unlock some of the other barriers in whether that was the brand positioning stuff that we touched on, or the product offering, and even to a certain extent the price points, that some of those other sort of limiting factors that were preventing us from growing more like how we're growing now started to fall away, and then we really started to hit it.
But it's also with our like digital marketing and all of the like our advertising we were doing, and like that really helped as well. Like it pull everything into line and be targeting the right people and giving them the right content. All of that lined up too. There
has to be some element of doubt in your mind, I would think, through that time. Like, what was it that kept you being like, no, this is definitely right? Like, you can see, was it just the fact that like, our growth numbers, even though it's small, are still directionally very good? Like, this is going to, in time, get to where we think it can?
For me, one of the the factors that maybe gave a lot of hope in those early stages was that the people that were using us, their feedback was overwhelmingly positive, like borderline scripted, like couldn't write the review better. Like, just like, this was so convenient and so handy, and the price was amazing, and we've never had this selection. Like, it was just out of control. And it was like, oh wow, like we have actually really helped this person with their project and their renovation, and like, this is a valuable thing for them in their renovation journey. And even though we weren't doing like lots of transactions on like a day-by-day basis, it was like the people that we were helping were really enjoying it. And so it's like, okay, how can we help more people?
Enjoying it, and the way they were enjoying it was exactly in line with your insight, it sounds like. That it's really about convenience and choice. Yeah,
they became brand ambassadors without even us like trying to push it on them. And then they would be like, oh, my friend Sandra's doing a renovation. And then, they would, just tag her, or, and then be like, this is who I used. Yeah. And like, then it was like, when people are promoting your business without you having to promote it, it's the best, word of mouth is the best form of advertising ever. Like, if someone's had a good experience and then they post about it, like, or they tell someone about it, they can't be anything better.
And I think that comes back to the authenticity piece too. It's like they are posting about it because your brand has hit like a real core nerve with that person, because you're solving a problem in a way that they've wanted it to be solved but hasn't been able to yet. And so to your point, I think it's as you've demonstrated, it's very, very powerful as growth.
I think people maybe slightly overestimate the size of our business and the like how personal it actually is. And I think that when you start to read our reviews, you read them and it's like, oh, thank you so much, Floss, for helping me do this, and helping me with my
Mel
design or whatever.
That, yeah.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Layla. Like, it's not. I'm not reviewing some like corporation. It's like I'm reviewing a personal experience with with the designer that helped me on the other end of the line. And it's like we had a connection, like figuring out how to get this project into shape and make it all happen. And that was like authentic.
Yeah, when we started TileCloud, we didn't have like a design help service. We just kind of thought that people would be self-serving and go onto the website and be able to put a look together and be done. And then we really quickly, when we put a phone number on the website, the phone number was originally linked to my mobile number. It's like a 1300 number, but it would come through to my mobile, and I would then just get call after call of people being like, oh, I'm on the site and I need help with this. And then we ended up, having to expand our phone call. I couldn't get all the calls anymore. But we instantly knew that we needed people to help people put the look together. So now we have in-house interior designers, and people book online, and we do screen share, or in our space here that we work in Rosebery, you can come in and have a design appointment as well. And that service is utilized so much. We're booked up till the middle of October. People call and they're like, oh, there's something wrong with your online booking. And we're like, no, there's not. Like, there's just no appointments left. And people want that, they want the convenience, but they also want to know that they can have the help when they need it. A lot of them will have purchased a sample box online, realize the complexness of putting a room together, and then they'll book an appointment, and then we'll help them through that process, which is so lovely. Often when we do the call, we'll be on loudspeaker with the husband. Most renovators also normally have a newborn baby as well, so they're like, oh, I've just got to go and do this, and then they'll come back. Like, there's definitely
real suckers for punishment.
Yeah. We do it. We have a lot of customers who are about to give birth in about 2 months, and they're like, I need to do my bathroom before the baby comes. Very common. And it's like, wow. They'll tell us, and we're like, yeah, everyone's like that. But yeah, now we offer this design service that's been really we've been doing it now, I think 2 years we've been doing the design service, and people really love it, and we really love it, because every day we get feedback on, lots of people on their Pinterest board have got a tile that looks like this. We're currently not offering this tile. Okay. Me and Drew then are like, okay, where do we get the tile from? How can we get that? Like, if we see it enough, then we constantly have these points of contact with our customers. So as owners and founders of the business, we're constantly knowing how to change it. It's not like, oh, our staff are just doing that. It's, myself, I do design appointments. Most days I have a couple, and it's the way that we're able to expand range, make sure that what we're talking about online is still super relevant. If we're talking about, pink tiles and everyone's like, I hate that, like, then it's like, we're always making sure that we're talking about correct things, and, using Pinterest is a really good tool to see what people are putting their mood boards together as. And so, keeping people online and in that like online space, but learning from them all the time.
A lot of people, they seem to be really good at putting together a Pinterest board with some inspiration shots of what they want the end goal to look like. And where they struggle in the process is just which products do I need to choose that will get me this end result. And so, I would say the core service of our design help is around connecting those dots of like, you will get this result and achieve this look if you select these products. And it's like, on one hand it's like, oh, can't you just tell like that the walls are white, it's the white tile, like, isn't it simple? It's like, well, actually no, there is a bit of subtlety to it, and also a bit of reassurance I think is important as well, that people are selecting products that are fit for purpose, that they're not picking something that's going to be slippery underfoot or whatever it is.
The other thing is, a lot of the people making the decision making are normally the women in the family, and so we find that our design appointments also give these women lots of confidence to then talk to the tradesperson about what questions do I need to ask about the floor waste. What are the words that I should be asking when they come in and they say what size tile should be on the floor? So often we'll do a design appointment, and then they'll come back to us as we're their safe space of like, they'll be like, oh, Floss, I've done this and now I need help with that. And we're like, yeah, here you go. Here's the help with that. And it's like empowering people to, these are expensive decisions they're making. So empowering them to make the right decision is really important. And so it's like, helping these, families and women make that decision. So it's really exciting. Not everyone has a tradesperson as like a husband or a partner, and so they need that extra help, and we're there to do that.
I think it's a really interesting nuance on the online model though. Like, a lot of people would think, oh, online's great, you can just sell 10 or 10 million tiles and you don't necessarily need more staff to do it. But I think you've kind of shown that actually there is a human element to these businesses that is very additive to the business. If you have your design appointments, you have human touch points, gives you a lot more information on what customers actually want and how it's actually working, and even like sets them up for more success. Like, back to your point around, I'm sure there's nuances around buying the right tiles for your house and working with tradespeople who are working on the house, etc. And that if you just buy the tiles yourself and get that wrong, there's probably a decent chance you're going to waste money. But injecting a person in that process to help give them that confidence and context that's hard to get otherwise just makes it more successful.
Yeah, it's a really good insight. It's like, the key reasons why we have become so successful happen to be fundamentally, unscalable. And that although we're an e-commerce business, it's like you still need that personal touch.
The topic of this podcast and why we brought you on is unconventional business, and what are businesses that have done things in an unconventional way. And I think, that just speaks to that point where it's not necessarily conventional to have an online product that has a lot of human involvement as well, but actually that unconventional structure gives it the most success. And it seems like it's clear that you are experiencing a lot of success now. What advice would you give to other people looking to start a business, and maybe it's unconventional for the industry and they're getting a lot of the same feedback that you got when you started, that no, you can't do that in this industry. No, shipping means you can't sell tiles online. No, the customer experience, it should be done this way, or people want to buy in store. There's a lot of people listening that would love to start a business like TileCloud. What kind of words of wisdom would you give them to get them through that period of uncertainty?
My first thing of because I do have friends who've started businesses since we've started TileCloud, and they'll ask things. And my biggest thing that I say to people is just start an Instagram and start speaking to people and see if anyone's listening. It's free. You can do it on your phone. You can put something together. That's my, I guess, from a branding and even just from a sales point of view, it's start talking to people and see if there's something that someone's saying. I think we started TileCloud's Instagram maybe 2 months before, and we should have started it sooner. I think I was too nervous to say anything because I didn't know what we were saying, what to say yet. And I wish, we'd shown people the process of us starting this business more, or, things like that, or about picking things, or, just be open and be, authentic with people. And that's super important. So that would be my advice. Just start talking to people, start doing it every day.
I have two things to add. Just on that Instagram one, I think people get caught up in Instagram numbers of I don't have 10,000 followers. So, how could I possibly start? It's actually, if you sold one thing to all those people, that's way more customers than you could ever handle. You don't need 10,000. You probably don't even need 100. If you have an Instagram following of, 50 people and you sold, your widget to all 50, you'd probably be bloody flat out. So just the idea that you need to, build up to some magical giant number before you're ready, or, whatever is just not true. But then back to your question about advice for somebody, starting up something like this, I would say, number one, you have to have an ability to actually execute on your plans. I think that a lot of people have a lot of good ideas, and I think that ideas are pretty easy to come by in the scheme of things. In the hierarchy of making this happen, the idea was very easy. It's about sort of bringing together some things that we saw in some different industries and applying it to an age-old process of tiles have been around since forever and a day. There is no real genuine innovation here. This is not an invention, but it's just bringing together some different ideas from different industries and sort of combining it in a new way and packaging it a little bit differently. That's actually that is convenient.
In a previous life, I did a law degree, which was a really fool's errand because I can't spell borderline my name, let alone anything else, and I'm not wired that way. But I remember studying IP law, and there was two ways that an invention could come to be. One was a brand new thing, but actually the other one was a unique combination of two existing things. And I think that is actually the invention we see in business that is often the most successful. It's where people think something can't be done a certain way in a certain industry, but then you've combined that with something else, being this e-commerce experience largely inspired by the fashion world, And that unique combination of two things creates something that's actually, I think you should call it an invention for your industry, and where it is true and where people are wanting that service, you see a lot of success, even despite the doubters at the start.
I feel like my advice wasn't actually really genuine advice. I was just saying, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. My actual advice, I think, is this: it's figure out a way that you can test the idea without having to mortgage your house and go all in on the whole thing. Like you need some level of validation, and I think Flo's advice there around being able to talk to customers and get a bit of a dialogue going and seeing if you're actually being helpful or solving some sort of a problem for people. That's kind of that exact same thing. It's like, can you figure out some sort of a, like the stepping stones to get to the idea, and test those, and then you just test a little bit more and a little bit more until you start running out of reasons why you shouldn't go to that next level, and just keep sort of like iterating on that. Because I think that if you have to do it in a way where it's like, we're at zero and the only way this idea is going to work is if we go to 1,000 overnight, and all our money is in this basket, and the vibe is different. The vibe is not so good. It's frantic and it's stressful, and it's like you don't get time to test and plan and get that feedback and refine the idea and let it grow and evolve into what it should be, because what you think it should be and what it actually ends up being might be a little bit evolved. So if you can figure out a way to like test stuff and do some stepping stones, I think that's really a good way to approach it.
Well, and I think as well, it's staying with the idea and continuing to refine your approach even when you're not necessarily getting immediate success. I think we've touched on today, like a lot of people have this external perception that like you start a business and everything is up and to the right, but actually it's momentum that builds over time. And prior to HubSpot, I actually worked at Red Balloon for a while. And one thing that people forget about the Red Balloon success is they actually, I think it took a year before they sold their first product. So they launched the business and it took a year before anyone actually bought anything. And they stuck with the business for that long, just trying to make it better, trying to refine the process. And then over time it grew to be a super successful business. But if they had just read TechCrunch and were like, oh, hang on, everything's not going ballistic straight away, and given up, they would have missed the opportunity to create a pretty unique business. So I think staying with it, even where, it's not all going perfectly at any one time, is also a lesson that's not told a lot. But if you look behind any business success, it's often one that they've had to work through.
I remember the day we launched the website, Drew and I, we rang the developer and they're like, you're live. And so we then went onto Google and Googled TileCloud, and we didn't come up until the 10th page. And we were just like, what? Where's the business? How are people, if you can't even find us when you Google the name, how are you going to find us? And then we called the developer and we're like, oh, where's the business? He goes, no, Google has to find your website first and then troll it, and then you'll start listing. And we're like, oh, okay. That's a whole thing as well. So and I think you listen to, I personally, and I know Drew has as well, we listen to all of the NPR, How I Built This business podcasts about all those businesses, and you're like, oh my God, the day they launched, they sold out of everything. And it's that doesn't really happen to anyone, I don't think. And I don't think it even happened to them. They might have edited some really great bits together.
There's a lot of revisionist history,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah. And it's also the thing of I think, the time to think and look at when the business was live on the website, and then that's how we had the time to refine it and change our pricing and do all of that kind of stuff. That's where we really learnt who we were and what we wanted to do and what we wanted to say as well. But Yeah, that was a fun day. I think the website came up on Google like a week later, and we're like, guys, if you Google TileCloud, like you'll be able to see it now. It comes up after, I think that before it was like this coded thing from some website that launched like 10 years ago, and it was just like the words tile and cloud in the one sentence together, and we were underneath them, and we're like, oh, that's success. Like we're coming up on Google now.
Yeah, we were being outranked by an article that just mentioned the words tile and cloud. It's like, that's not good SEO.
Red Balloon was held up as an example at UNSW of what a website should not look like from their first version. So I think
was that at COFA? Did they put that up at like the design school being like, don't do
yeah,
it?
because I think it was like red text on a black background, and it was like, please never launch a website like this. It doesn't really work. So yeah, I think great e-commerce stories in Australia seem to have a common thread that you got to start somewhere and iterate as you go.
Got to start somewhere.
Congratulations on the success you've all had so far. It sounds like everything is going really well, and you've worked through a lot of those early teething problems. I'm sure, there's a saying our CEO likes to say is like, you just graduate to a new set of problems and a new set of competitors as you grow your business. There's never like, oh, we're through and everything's easy street. No, there's always new problems and competitors. But I think you've reached a size and growth and certainly a notoriety amongst people I know that means you're well on your way to a huge success. So congratulations and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for tuning in to Unconventional Business by HubSpot. If you liked what you listened to, please subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next episode.